how did you know there was something different about Bryant?
Yes. Well, so it was very interesting because we have a neurodivergent family. So my daughter has sensory processing disorder, but we didn't necessarily know it at the time. And so in my journey with Bryant, I've learned more about my daughter, more about myself as well. And so what basically happened is Bryant was what the doctor called a sponge. He said there were repeaters as far as speech and language, and then there were sponges that just absorb anything. At one point in time, they're just going to start talking. Bryant never really started talking. And so he was a quiet baby. He was a good baby because he was so quiet all the time. But what we didn't know is he couldn't articulate his speech. He couldn't move his structures in his mouth and his tongue around properly to be able to say sounds. And it wasn't until one night where we actually had to bring him to the hospital. He was crying, screaming in pain. The doctor thought he had a bowel obstruction. There could have been lots of things. He was checked for meningitis. He had a spinal tap. There was lots of things that were going on to try to figure out what was happening. He was 2 years old, so he should have been speaking a little bit at that point in time, but he wasn't. And after that hospitalization, which they figured out it was this weird strain of influenza and earache, we went to a follow-up appointment with our doctor, which was 3 days later. And we had a different doctor this time, not our usual pediatrician that knows Bryant very well. And she said, it sounds like he's underwater. It sounds like, does he have hearing problems? And that's what started our early intervention, basically. We started down the process of hearing tests. He can hear fine. We started going through evaluation. In the States, we have early childhood intervention up until 3 years old. He was evaluated. He was behind in all his milestones, and especially in articulation of speech. So they focused on that. We had a speech therapist that was given to us that came to our house weekly and sometimes bi-weekly to help him articulate. But I started noticing flashcards. He would say the same sound fine over here, but when you switch to a different sound, he had trouble. So it all started with the speech. And then when he was 3, we had to go to a private speech therapist, pay out of pocket for that. And our speech pathologist, Deb Gadd, is really the person that kind of helped us navigate all the realms. At that point in time, Bryant was having trouble with executive function and skills. He had trouble doing first things first, second things. He had trouble with fine and gross motor skills. He started having some behavioral issues because he was being pushed out of his comfort zone. And so we started on the route of occupational therapy, vision therapy, food therapy, speech therapy. And so that's kind of where our journey began.